We just do it. They'll turn out okay. Welcome to Talking Time with Caffeine, the podcast where we talk about recent events or topics we like to talk about and go down that rabbit hole. Today, my guest is, well, I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Godless Granny, and I have a channel by that name, Godless Granny, and I make videos that are primarily aimed at anti-theism. That leads me into a number of other topics that are very much intertwined with that. As you see from my shirt, I am an LGBTQ ally. I also I do sometimes consider myself a part of the LGBTQ community because I am an asexual. I consider myself kind of a fringe because I don't see asexuals as being as oppressed as most people, but I do like to identify with the community when it comes to the hate preachers who say that anyone who's a member of the LGBTQ community is a sinful um, reprobate. And I say, okay, please tell me what it is that I am doing that you find so reprehensible. I am not having sex. Is that okay with you? Is there a problem with not having sex?
I don't I don't have sex right now, and I'm not asexual, so yeah, no problem at all.
I didn't even know I was asexual until, gosh, probably 2, 3 years ago. Um, and when someone brought up asexuality, I said, "What's that?" And someone described it. Said, "Oh, that's me."
Yeah, it's not like
Hi,
the
Claire.
it's not like the single cell asexuals.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like you're not like buddying off, creating your clone of yourself.
Yeah, the biggest giveaway that I reflected back on my life as a going all the way back to my teenage years when people started describing what it was to be asexual was first when Prince Charles and Lady Di got married. So many of the girls were just absolutely gaga over Prince Charles, and so many of my friends were volunteering to be his mistress after the wedding. And I was like, why? What's this, who cares about Prince Charles? And the other one was there was this teacher, uh, and he wasn't at my school, he was at a different school. And I was in speech competitions, and so we frequently went from school to school for speech competitions. And some of the people, the female members of our team, were just absolutely gaga over this teacher at this one other school. And there's, oh, isn't he dreamy? Isn't he darling? I was like, no, I mean, he's just a man. He's just a man. And that's just how I feel about men and women. I don't find anyone sexually attractive. I can be turned on, but it is not easy.
So, are you a grandma? You,
Yes, I
you,
have 5 grandchildren.
so
Mhm.
so at least one time you were.
Oh, I'm still married. Um,
Well, I meant you were sexually involved at one time, obviously, because
yes, yes. My husband's also kind of lost interest in sex as well, and so we have a pretty much platonic relationship. Every once in a while, we have sex, but I'm not really interested, and he's not really interested. So,
well, I guess that's the basis of anything, really. If you're still if you're still friends, at least, then you can at least talk to each other.
hmm. Hmm.
But
And he is a good companion.
I hope so. You did marry him after all.
We've been married for over 40 years.
Nice. Nice. That's about time I was born, and I thought I was old.
No, you definitely are not old.
Yeah, yeah. You feel. I work at fast food, and I feel old when some of the kids I work with, or the kids that people in school with,
Hmm.
makes you feel old.
Hmm.
But, yeah. But speaking of, did you, they are, but they are not all exclusive, which I am glad, because they this one group did try to get membership into them, and they're like, no fucking way. You're not being part of us. You group that one, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, like yeah, we're not that inclusive.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's because
Because that would like this,
consent is important.
and so is age.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. If you are
Yeah,
underage, you cannot consent. You don't have the capacity to consent. And if someone is
true.
not consenting, then no, that's not
Yeah,
acceptable.
yeah. So, anyways, so were you always godless, Granny?
Oh, heavens no. Heavens no. I've only been an atheist since 2019. Um, I was a Christian for 42 years, and I not only believed it, I mean, I taught it. I went on mission trips. I sang in the choir. I taught Bible study. I taught VBS. I was the financial. I was the treasurer for one church. I was the yeah, I've done almost everything in a church that a woman can do in a fundamentalist church, which means you can't be a pastor, and you can't teach men. Women can't teach men. So I've led ladies groups and I've led children's groups, but I've never taught a group that has men in it because women aren't allowed to do that.
Yeah, I know. I was a major churchgoer from the age of 5 to the age of 29.
Mm, okay.
Was a little break in my middle school years
Mm-hmm.
before I went back because for about 10 or so years, and I I quit my church at 29, went to another church for 2 years, and then for a while I was I guess a non church going Christian, but even then I just slowly faded off the radar.
I um I really only count my Christian years from age 16 to 58. I did go to church as a young child with my parents, but my parents left the church when I was 7, and I don't consider those any of my Christian years because I was too young to really understand what was going on. Um, and I converted to Christianity when I was 16. And I did not convert to Catholicism, which my parents had been Catholic. And that was one thing that I still think is so funny that my parents at that point were unbelievers. And they weren't upset that I was a believer. They were upset that I was a Protestant. Particularly my mother. There is no God, but if there is a God, it's the Catholic God.
Yeah, it's funny. Even within in the Christian denomination, there's wars between themselves. Like no, you're not the right kind of Christian. You're the wrong kind of Christian.
Right.
You're not a true Christian.
Hmm.
Even years after that, if after the splits, like nope, we're still fighting. You're still wrong. But
Which
you're
just
just
goes to show you that even Jesus can't get his prayers answered.
yeah, you're just as bad as those atheist people because you're the wrong kind of Christian.
Yep.
Oh. So when you were a full-fledged churchgoer, were you like a creationist one, or are you still a science
Was I a what?
creationist full goer, or are you
Oh,
like
creationist. Um, I was at first because one of the things that was used to convert me, believe it or not, to my shame, this is my great shame, chick tracks. Yes, they showed me chick tracks, and I was convinced, and I believed what was in the chick tracks. Um, and so I bought into the whole that, anyone who's an unbeliever doesn't understand science. Science was never my forte. I did well enough in science to get through school, but once I got into college, I took all of two science classes in college. I took biology 101, which I did just fine in, and I took chemistry 101 for non-science majors. That was a fun class. It was designed to be a fun class. It was designed to show how chemistry can be fun. We made nylon, we made wine, we made brandy. We just made fun things with chemicals was what we did. I don't remember anything that we learned in that class. Of course, then again, that was 40 years ago. So I don't remember specific classes at all in college except for
Well,
one,
really,
which I've
even
used all through life.
even 20 years ago now, most of the stuff that we learned there, the science stuff, is probably I don't say completely outdated, but that new stuff has happened in those 20 to 40 years since we've been in school. That new discoveries have happened since then. So
Absolutely. And there's two things I want to bring up on that. First of all, I have a daughter that's a doctor. She's a pediatrician. And one thing that was just my jaw was on the floor when she told me this was when she finished residency, she said half of what I learned my first year of med school just 8 years ago is already obsolete. In the 4 years I went to med school, 4 years of residency, now that I've finished residency, half of what I learned in med school is already obsolete. That was jaw dropping for me.
and that really goes to show that like the not only the of science knowledge but of medical knowledge too.
Hmm.
Like a
Hmm.
few years ago when people were you remember the all the big drama about the vaccine a few years ago, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, like vaccines take years to progress, all this stuff, and it's taking over like less than a year. And like last time we had a vaccine, like say major vaccine flu, like the chicken pox or the even like the smallpox things, that 20 years ago our PCs had a 5 gigabyte hard drive. We thought that was amazing. Now a 5 gigabyte hard drive is even our cell phones, even smaller. Technology has improved gaps in 20 years. So why is that? So why can't our medical technology be able to like get a cure for a vaccine in a year rather than 20 years?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, one of the arguments that Christians made back when I was in my early Christian days is that a computer takes up an entire room, whereas your brain, is in this small area. Look how much greater God is than man, because what man can make that can compute doesn't even come close to what a human brain can do. And yet, look how much space we need for a computer. And that argument has been completely shut up by semiconductors and microchips.
Yeah, this cell phone has more stuff on it than my first computer did 20
Hmm.
years ago.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, going back to the change, how much things change. When I listened to Erica Gutsick-Gibbon, I was listening to one stream where she was talking about the difference between Ardipithecus ramidon and Australopithecus forensis, and she was saying, "This is baby stuff. This is first year biology stuff." And I said, I've never heard of Ardipithecus ramidon. What even is that? And so I looked it up, and it was something that was discovered in like the 1990s. And I said, well, no wonder I don't know what it is. It wasn't discovered until after I finished school.
Well, not even that. Some of the stuff that I learned about recently was discovered before I was even born, but sometimes it takes that long to get to the public knowledge.
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
like like in school, I was still learning about the five uh, groups of vertebrates of fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. But now, they're all one clade group. Now birds are reptiles almost and stuff like that, and there's more
Hmm.
connected than we thought that was. But they knew that for a while, but it took a while for us to know this stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
But now
Which
I'm
is
glad.
which is why it's hard for young Earth creationists who are older to let go of the idea that there's no such thing as evolution, is because they see the different animal groups as being very separate, the kinds, and that there's limits. A finch can speciate into other types of finches, but a finch can never be a lizard because
Yeah,
birds are not reptiles.
and good thing it's a good thing evolution didn't teach that ever. I like how they wrote what they call strawman. They say we do stuff that we don't really do.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, I learned yesterday that I was a fish. There was some young Earth creationist that was saying that anything that swims is a fish. I swim. I guess I'm a fish.
yeah. For me, um, I was never really a young Earth creationist. I might consider myself an older Earth creationist because even when I was little and in that 4 year gap, I learned a lot about Earth history. I read books about it. I watched stuff on the History Channel back when it was real. Back when this is back when the History Channel was actually the History Channel in my opinion. Back in the old saying back in my day.
Mhm.
Yeah, back in my day, the History Channel actually taught history,
Mhm.
and MTV actually had music.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then like we getting back to church later in life, it got kind of gaps. Like I was like, wait a minute, like the flood, for example. I was like, wait a minute, how can the flood have happened 4,000 years ago if Native Americans crossed the land bridge 10,000 years ago? I'm like, something's not adding up in my brain.
Well, I young Earth broke for me the day I went to the Shed Aquarium because the young Earth creationists made the mistake of making a falsifiable claim. And that claim was that fish cannot grow lungs. So when I walked in the Shed Aquarium and I saw the lungfish, I thought, no, these fish can't have lungs. Fish do not grow lungs. And so I read the whole. I my kids think this is terrible, but when I go to a museum, an aquarium, a zoo, we read all the signs. And my kids say, "You guys take forever because you see, you have to read every side." Well, I did. I read the whole sign. These fish really do have lungs. There is such a thing as a lungfish. They're sitting right there in front of me. They have lungs. And so that was the day that young Earth was over for me, and then I went to old Earth. But
So
one thing I didn't do
you didn't
at
go
that
this.
point.
Sorry, I say so. You didn't go to the theistic evolution gap, or do you go there, or do you start?
Well, that's what I didn't do. I didn't really think about it. At that point, I did move to an old Earth position where, yeah, there was a gap that, the gap theory, and that, God guided evolution. And, I suddenly went from completely denying evolution existed to completely accepting that evolution really was a thing. But what I didn't do was figure out how does the timeline fit with the Bible. That it never even occurred to me to even think about, to put those two things together.
Yeah, that's what I like about not like I'm saying it for it, but like the AIG people and the Get Help people are like they paint it so black and white that you're
Mhm.
either a Christian creationism or you're an atheist evolutionist. I don't they consider the people that are in between a little bit.
Mhm. That the church I was going to, well, one of the churches I went to, the pastor really didn't care for Ken Ham. And his entire reasoning was that Ken Ham says that anyone who is not a young earther is not a Christian. And um, my pastor was not a young earther, and most of the authors that he recommended also were not young earthers, and with good reason. I mean, you really have to deny reality to take a younger stance. Now,
Yeah,
he was not hard on old earth. He didn't say much about it because he knew that there were some young earthers in our congregation. And I did have, a series of lectures from Ken Ham in the library that I ran at the church. But we took a very soft view on it, that you can go either way.
yeah. I think that them trying to go the hard stance black and white. I think it's like I think they push more people away from than they bring them in. Like They're
Yeah.
like, if I have to deny science to be part of this, no, thank you, I'll be over here. And then,
Hmm. The video that I'm working on for releasing this next week is a response to Ken Ham, and that is one of the points that I make that you know, being so dogment dogmatic, that's the word I'm looking for, being so dogmatic about what is and what is not acceptable for a person to believe is driving people out the doors. And his whole point of his video is the church is being destroyed and we need to fix it, and here's what we need to do to fix it. And yet he doesn't recognize that he's the biggest problem.
like like you said, it's like, I don't know, probably too late at this point, but even I think even in the 2000s, some churches were trying to, like, what's the word, uh, be more inclusive, like the gay churches
Hmm.
and stuff. Even though by this point I don't really care, but at the time I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
There's a very definite progressive movement in Christianity, and there's a real schism going on. And one place where you can really see the schism is in the Southern Baptist Church. The Southern Baptist Church is getting ready to divide because Rick Warren has decided that it's okay to ordain women, and there's a number of churches that are with him. And of course, he is the biggest pastor in the Southern Baptist Convention. And so the portion of the convention that's adamant that no, women cannot be pastors, and if you let women be pastors, you're violating the word of God. It's causing a real split. And Rick Warren rightfully looks at it and says, "Look, we're having major problems here. We don't have enough people that want to be pastors. And for us to tell half of our potential workforce, you can't do this, we're shooting ourselves in the foot." And Rick is right. Um, the problem comes with, the Bible saying that women can't be pastors, although it's really easy to get around those verses if you want to reinterpret them. I mean, all you have to do is look at it and say, well, it says that you need to be the husband of one wife. And they've always taken that to mean, therefore, you must be a man. You could easily interpret that to mean you can only have one spouse. So a woman can be a pastor, she just can only have one husband.
Yeah, even in the Old Testament, there were famous women people
Hmm.
like that one
Deborah.
judge. Yeah,
Deborah. Hmm.
so, yeah.
What I find ironic is that those that hold that women can't be pastors are adamant that when it says a pastor can only be, must be the husband of one wife, is not a requirement that he be married. And
Yes, yes. I think now you married some churches. I think if you're divorced, you can't be you can't be a pastor or something.
correct. Some people take it that far that yeah. Others interpret it to mean you can only have one wife at a time, which means you can divorce and remarry. You just can only have one wife at a time. You can't be a polygamist. Which, the thing that I find so laughable is the book is so excuse me. The book is so vague. You can interpret it so many different ways. If there was a God that actually cared about what we thought of this book, you would think that that God would speak up and say so.
Yeah, my parents left the church before I did. I mean, they were still Christians, but I think they left in the mid '90s when at the time I didn't care because I wasn't voting, but I didn't think too much about it. But at the time, they started pushing, if you're a Christian, you got to vote Republican
Mhm.
stance.
Mhm.
I was still a teenager, so I didn't really care that much about the politics of the stuff until I got older.
I never bought into the politics portion of it. Even when I was, a strong fundamentalist Christian. I never bought into the politics of it. I usually did support Republican candidates up until, I think it was up until Obama. I think Obama was the first Democrat that I voted for. Um, let's see, who was president before Obama? Let's see,
Bush Jr.
Bush. Yeah, I'm
And
pretty
then
sure I voted for all the for both of the Bushes. I know I voted for the first one. I'm pretty sure I voted for the second one. Um,
I think then it was see Clinton and Bush in '92, Clinton and Dole in '96. Then then the Reagans and all that stuff.
mhm. No, Reagan was in the 80s.
Yeah, right, that's why I'm going back.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. But anyway, yeah, so I raised my kids that you can vote for whoever you want to. And so we were definitely in the extreme minority saying it's okay to be a Democrat. And my oldest, who is still a fundamentalist Christian, was an outlier at her school because she says, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a Christian.
Yeah, it's the like the same thing racism. It's the you're either this and this or you're not.
Hmm. Well, it's entirely the issue of abortion that divides them. Um, the 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 fundamentalists say that you cannot be a Christian and be in favor of abortion. That they consider those two things to be mutually exclusive because God values life so much that he would drown all of the children, or he would murder Egyptian children, or he would send bears to go after children that called someone baldy. But God values life so much that you
You know,
can't
it's
abort
funny.
and
You know what's funny about that? I heard this before on some other channel. And I agree with it. Just because you're pro-choice doesn't mean you're like pro-abortion. It means it's none of your damn business. It means
Mhm.
yeah, it's because you might think of you as a person doesn't mean you can't be pro-choice. It just means it's not your choice.
Mhm. My main thing is that it's complicated. It's a complicated medical decision, and so it belongs in as a decision between a woman and her doctor. No one else.
Yeah, I did a whole thing on the last year video on the Supreme Court overturning thing.
Mhm.
And it affected me. Not affected, it really affected me, but because I learned that my state, Ohio, was one of those states, and I thought Ohio was being a northern state was more, I guess, progressive, but I was wrong.
Mhm.
And especially when I learned that they wouldn't let a 10-year-old that got raped have an abortion.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I once was on a stream with Atheist Edge, and he was pushing me to say at what point I would draw a hard line and say a woman can't have an abortion after this point. And I said, there isn't a point because there isn't a place where you can say absolutely for sure this is what's going on because everyone's body is different. And here's what I mean. I don't think a woman should have an abortion if she has a viable fetus. But what constitutes a viable fetus? I I read a case of a woman in New York who had a non-viable fetus inside of her, and she was 38 weeks pregnant. But she couldn't get an abortion even in New York because New York said no abortions after I think it was 32 weeks. And that was an absolute hard and fast line. And it didn't matter that the fetus inside of her was non-viable. She had to go to a state where there were no limits so that she could have this fetus aborted. Now, the anti-abortion people would say, well, she should have just carried it to term and then buried the stillborn baby. And anyone who says that has never had the experience of carrying a non-viable fetus.
Yeah,
I carried a dead fetus for 3 weeks. I had to stay home.
Yeah, having a death thing try to in your body is probably isn't that fun.
Well, it wasn't actually dead. It was still alive, but it could not live once it left the womb. It had insufficient brain matter to be able to survive outside the womb. Now mine was actually dead. Um, and I carried a dead fetus for 3 weeks, and it was horrible. You know, you go out and people see you, so obviously pregnant. Oh, what do you do? You must be so excited. You must be so happy. You say it's dead, and people look at me like I've lost my mind. No, I haven't lost my mind. I've got a dead baby inside of me.
Yeah, and even if it's alive, yeah, Ohio. I think Ohio is 12 weeks, so even less than 31. It's even less than 38
Hmm.
weeks. But you know, think that I'm like, if you're, I told someone, if you're old enough to be in a car seat yourself, you shouldn't have your own baby. Having a baby, having both the mother and the kid in the car seats isn't really a good idea.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because some 10-year-old, like I had a friend who kept her kid in a car seat just like, because some states have different age gaps, of the car seat rules,
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
yeah, if you're, well, sometimes 10-year-olds are still in car seats in some cars, let alone the baby.
Hmm.
So yeah, if you're in a car seat yourself, I don't think you'd be having a baby. Being forced to have a baby,
If you
at least
can't drive the baby to a medical appointment, you shouldn't be having a baby. If you can't support a baby, you shouldn't be having a baby. Now, when I say that, I don't mean someone who's financially poor. You know, obviously a person who's financially poor is still entitled to have a baby if they want to. But, we've got other means for that.
yeah, but yeah, you shouldn't be forced to keep it because either.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know of anyone that advocates for that.
apparently, know how they do.
Force people to keep a baby? They don't allow people to put a baby up for adoption?
Adoption. I think you meant. Oh, yeah. But even then, I've heard this, like, they force you to keep the baby, but then they once you have it, then it's not their problem anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I was in the foster care system, so I know part of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, so once you left the faith, anything else that you thought you never thought about before, it really like blew your mind?
The biggest thing that blew my mind was going outside and looking at nature. And that's because when I first lost my faith, okay, when I realized that the flood didn't happen, my whole faith collapsed with it as a house of cards because I had known through the experience of having lost a child. I examined very carefully what is the foundation of my faith? How do I know that there really is a God out there? And the answer to that question was the Bible. Because I know the Bible is the word of God, I know that there has to be a God because this is God's word. But once the Bible failed, once I realized that there was a falsehood in the Bible, that meant the Bible cannot be the word of an infallible God. So that's why my whole faith just collapsed at that point. It happened all in a second that I was just like, "Oh, I don't believe this anymore." But the one thing that kind of frightened me about all that is I I like going for walks. And when I was a believer, I would go for a walk and I'd go, wow, just look at all the beauty and splendor that God created. Isn't God wonderful? And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do that again. I'm never going to walk outside and look at nature and see the wonder of God. But the first time I went out for a walk as an atheist, and I looked around, I went, wow, to think that all of this could evolve naturally. That was mind-boggling for me. To suddenly see the whole world in a whole new light, that this isn't a creation of a God, but this all happened naturally. That was mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, for me it was for me it was more gradual, but really really got my attention from not really caring to fighting against it was during the pandemic when
Mm.
the church people were so anti-vaccine, anti-denial of everything that happened. I'm like, oh, you can't force us to go to church. Like they're forcing us not to go to church. All this stuff. Like they're not forcing you. You can still worship in your own house if you want to. You can do.
Mhm.
Some of them are so adamant against online things. Like, nope, you gotta be in person. It's like the people that claim there's no prayer in school anymore.
Mhm.
I'm like, I went to school. I prayed in school. No one
Mhm.
stopped me from praying.
Mhm.
They just like they can't force you to pray in classrooms. That's the
Right.
only thing. Is this
The
like,
the
like
the teacher can't lead in a prayer, but students can pray all they want.
I even read the Bible in study hall sometimes.
Mhm.
No one like kept on saying, nope, take that away from you.
Right. Yeah, that didn't happen.
It's funny, they they want to force. The thing is, you can't be a certain Don Red player because they say no, yes we can, but I bet they change their mind if the people in charge were like Muslims or Hindu. Like we got to read this prayer. Like no, that's against the religion. Like well, Billy, you said prayer at school. That's a prayer at school. There you go.
Mhm.
It's like it's
One of the most interesting things about prayer I ever saw was in the chat in one of my streams. One of my viewers said that he did an experiment. He prayed, he had a list of prayer requests, and he prayed one third of them to a screwdriver, one third of them to God, and one third of them to a can of beans. And he got the most answers to prayer from the screwdriver.
what do you pray for? That's your favorite answer.
I didn't ask him that. I'm sure there was a long list of things so that the experiment would work, but you usually pray for things like friends who are unemployed to get a job, for people who have ailments to get better.
Well, I
Um,
bet if he prayed, I bet if he prayed to be, if he was hungry at the can of beans, that can of beans probably answered his prayer.
but that's how Christians can say that they've seen answers to prayer is they pray for very mundane things, and when the mundane things happen, it's like, look, God did it. Look what God did.
Uh, but I, I'll say I love. I'll say love. I hate the some Christian that that are like the anti-doctor Christians. Like, oh, I'm not going to a doctor because God will take care of my dying kid.
Yeah, those are the real problem because they kill their kids. Their kids get sick and they just let them die. Yeah, those
It's
people
funny though.
awful.
I always thought those people were the extremes, the extreme. The anti-doctor people were the extreme until 2 years ago during the pandemic, and I'm like, and I realized a lot more of those people were around than I thought they were.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anti-denying science things. I'm like,
Yep.
wow, that's because
Some
before.
people
Sorry.
some people ask how I can be so adamant against religion when I was so pro it, and the answer is, because of that. I dedicated so much of my life. When I was a believer, my faith consumed the majority of my time and energy. And now that I realize that it was all for naught, I want just as much to convince people don't waste your time and energy on this as I wanted to convince them to do it when I was a believer.
Yeah, for the longest time I thought the majority of anti-vaxxers were on the far left side. Like the crystal people, like the medicine people, what's called alternative medicine people. I thought they were all left until the last 2 years ago when I realized I'll say it's shifted, but it feels like it's shifted to the right side.
Mhm.
You know what I mean, right?
Yep. Yep.
I used to make a joke about that criticism, giving the benefit of the doubt. I'm like against flat earthers. It's like, well, creationists only had 200 years to get the program. Flat earthers had over 2,000 years to get the program. Like, okay, I'll give them a little, even though it's totally proven wrong by now. They only had 200 years. Give them some time. Flat earthers, like, pff, that was BC stuff.
Mhm.
It's like I didn't even know flat earthers was a thing until recently. I'm like, that's still a
Same
thing.
here. I thought they were just, a few lunatics, but no, there's actually a movement for it. And there unfortunately, with the advent of the internet and being able to find more information on our own, it's also easy to find misinformation, and it's easy to get lost in some of these conspiracies.
Like when you were a Christian churchgoer, you were an anti-vaxxer, right?
No, never.
It's, even though church, I wasn't. It's like the two things I've heard. One, a few years ago that they were saying vaccines give you autism.
Mhm.
Remember that one?
Mhm.
And it's like, the more you learn about autism, isn't that big of a deal, really. A lot of folks, people have autism. Even if it wasn't, I'm like, I'd rather have autism than polio, personally. You know, I know someone that my friend's mom has polio, and she has a wheelchair in iron lungs and stuff. It's not fun.
Mhm.
So like, and then they're like the then they're like recently they were like the COVID vaccine has a microchips in them to control you,
Mhm.
to track you. I'm like, well, I'm so what? I'd rather have a chip in my chip in my blood than a tube down my throat.
Mhm.
Yeah, like they take something so mundane, or whatever, and not. I don't say it's that big of a deal, but compared to the other thing, it's even if it was true, which it's not. I'm like, rather have that than the disease. But no, disease is better apparently, even though it's totally wrong and the totally, what's the word, misconstruing it or strawmanning it. But it's just like, I love it how they, like, when they compare cars to evolution. Like, car was designed so evolution can't be true. So what are
Mhm.
some anti-science things that you fight against? You fight anything? You fight anything? You fight against any anti-science things on your channel?
I do some. I don't make that my forte because I don't know science all that well. I consider myself a little bit uh, weak in knowledge on science. I will talk a little bit about the beginning of the universe. I just put out a video on cosmology and how the universe began, but that was a children's video. It does not go into any depth because it's intended to be understood by a 10-year-old. So I feel comfortable with speaking about it at that level. Um, I do talk about evolution some, particularly. There was one. I was refuting a Catholic priest who was claiming that um, he wasn't denying evolution entirely. He was accepting that evolution happened, but not for humans. Humans were a special creation. How do you get there? Evolution. How did we get to be so much like chimps and bonobos when we're a special creation, but they aren't?
It's funny how they like to pick and choose. Like humans aren't monkeys, but we are mammals, but we're not animals.
Right, right, right.
It's like
Yeah.
yeah, we're vertebrates, but we're not this, but we are this.
Mhm.
So do you have any like rivals on YouTube? Like you have like a YouTube rival that you
No, no. I don't get noticed a whole lot. I have not had anyone make any responses to me. The closest would be S.J. Thomason. Um, she's popped up in my chat a couple times, and she's mentioned me in a couple videos, but she really hasn't said anything specific. She made this big video about how YouTube atheists just don't understand. I can't even remember what it was that she claimed that we didn't understand. Here's godless granny, and she has me saying something quite mundane, and she really doesn't even refute it. She just basically said, "Here's godless granny," as an example of an atheist. That was it, and moved on. So I really don't. I if I had to say people that I tend to feature, I try to spread it out, but I have found that the two most successful videos that I have done were both refuting J. Warner Wallace. And so I may do a little bit more J. Warner Wallace, although I really think he's getting ready to retire. He's been handing more and more of his channel off to his son, Jimmy Jr. Um, and so I think Wallace is getting ready to retire, but I don't think Junior can handle the channel because he doesn't have the background that his dad did. His dad's whole thing was, I was a detective. Can I detect Christianity? Can I detect Christ? But his son's only training is in apologetics and Bible. He really doesn't have anything to bring to the table.
mm,
I think one of the reasons why I'm most successful with J. Warner Wallace is I have a legal background,
oh,
and Wallace makes a lot of mistakes when he talks about evidence. And
what's your legal background?
I have a JD, a Juris Doctor. I got from Baylor Law School.
So you're from a lawyer or a judge or
I
something?
was a
Or
lawyer. I didn't work for a long time as a lawyer. I spent 10 years working for insurance companies in insurance law, but then I wanted to stay home and have kids. I never was really good at balancing work and life. When I was at work, I was worried about what was going on with my kids. And when I was home with my kids, I was worried that I wasn't doing enough for my work. And so after 10 years of working, I ended up having another baby and staying home. Part of it also was, my husband and I sat down and made a plan when we were first married, and the plan was that his career would dominate for the first 20 years of our marriage, and that my turn would come after the 20 years. Um, and the reason we picked 20 years was because he was in the military and he could do a full military career in 20 years. The problem was that once I finished law school and then had kids and then was ready to take over the dominant position, I discovered that I couldn't because I was too old to start as a new, young attorney. I didn't have the experience to match my age, and I realized that that whole plan wasn't going to work. I really would have liked to have been a trial attorney, but I waited too long to get started.
so you're probably not going to be a new Supreme Court justice in a few years. Then if an option comes up,
Hmm.
not going to be on the board to overthrow three overthrow some stuff.
I haven't kept up with enough to be able to do something like that anymore.
Uh, like I said, the stuff updating all the time. Even if you were up to date with stuff, it can be. Yeah, I joked with Erica one time, or yeah, I think it was Erica, or maybe it was Jackson, that which gets outdated more, scientific discoveries or computers?
Which is what more?
Which gets updated or
Oh,
outdated
uh
more,
huh.
on the computer or like an old science thing discovery?
Hmm.
Because stuff is already always happening, even more than usual, even more than when we were kids.
Hmm. Getting back to the thing with J. Warner Wallace, I found a number of mistakes that he makes with regards to evidence and rules of evidence. And I can see why it would slip right by a lay audience, particularly some of his bait and switch. That's one of the things that he's a master at is bait and switch. And a really good example of that is, he'll tell you that he's going to lay out a case for Christ. He's going to show you, just like he would the evidence for a murder trial, beyond a reasonable doubt that Jesus really was crucified and raised from the dead. But then he'll pivot to another topic and talk about something for a bit, and then he'll talk about his evidence for the resurrection, and then he'll say, see, the resurrection is the most reasonable conclusion you can come to from the evidence. That's not beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a preponderance of the evidence. And those are two very different standards. And you will never get a conviction based on a preponderance of the evidence. You need beyond a reasonable doubt.
That makes me another point that I almost forgot about, like how the criticisms that were not just theists, but criticism, or I guess theists in general, like him, was like they either don't stay on topic of their thing, or they bring up something that's totally off topic and say, "See, because of this can't happen."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like me and my friend Tony Reed and other friend Eric made a, a t- term called the Hoven hustle.
Mm-hmm.
Where like even not him, even other people, was like, how can evolution be true if the rocks are this old, or because of the Big Bang? I'm like, that's good and all, but what is geology or the Big Bang had to do with evolution? Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, stay on topic, please. Like,
Yeah,
it's
they
like
don't realize that those are different topics. They think that abiogenesis and evolution are the same thing, and they're not.
I think someone, uh, I think I think exactly said that. I think it makes sense. It was like they're like, you can't you can't make a cake if you don't know where the wheat was grown to make the flour for the cake, or if you don't know where the chicken from the eggs came from, then the cake can't exist because you don't know where the eggs came from. Something like that.
Mm.
It's like like well, evolution can't be true if we don't know where the first cell came from, or we don't. Evolution can't be true if we don't know where the Big Bang came from. Like, I mean, there might be connected somewhat, but it's not the same thing. Evolution is about life biology, not about how life is created or anything else. It's not the same subject.
Mhm. The other mistake that they make constantly is that they think that evolution means an animal turning into another one, and that a dog will one day give birth to a zebra, and trying to explain to them that no, that's not how it works.
Oh, so it's easy about for an hour or so. I can't, and my brain's going dead right now. I can't think of anything to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, so that happens sometimes when you only have two people.
Mhm.
Sometimes three people, conversation going a little bit more.
Mhm.
When two people, sometimes you're like, I can't think of anything to say, and this is dead air. But anyways, so what's coming up on your channel? You want anything you want to advertise?
Sure. Later on tonight, this isn't on my channel, but on Sydney Davis Jr.'s channel, I will be appearing at 7 p.m. Central Time tonight. So, in 1 hour, I will be on another channel for another stream. I will not have a stream on my channel next week because I'm going away for the weekend, but I do have a response to Ken Ham coming out later this week, which will feature a new song by Art Against Ignorance. Jesus drown all of the children.
So what are you rebutting Ham against?
He's got a video called "This One Thing is Destroying the Church," and it's interesting because what he's claiming is destroying the church is believers themselves, which he's right about. Um, and he asked a woman that works, I'm not sure if she works for him or for a polling group, to do a study of why people are leaving the church, and particularly why young people are leaving churches where they were dedicated believers, where they were going to church every week, where they were what Ken Ham would consider good churches. They were young Earth creationist churches. And one of the things that they found was that young people who go to Sunday school are far more likely to leave the faith than kids that don't go to Sunday school. Now, Ken Ham has completely missed the boat when it comes to why this is. His view is we're not teaching the right things. We're not giving our kids good grounding in apologetics. That's his conclusion. But really, the answer is kids that go to church but not Sunday school, they don't really have to think about it. They can sit in the pew and play on their phone through the sermon or draw pictures through the sermon, or even if they're listening to the sermon, they don't really have to think about it or engage with it. But when you're sitting in Sunday school and you're hearing the lesson and they're asking questions, you really have to think about it a lot more. And when you think about it, then you realize the whole bunch of, it's all a bunch of hogwash. And so um, I think the real thing that this study came up with is that if you think about it enough, you realize it's not true. And that's where the young people are going.
Yeah, for me, next week we're going off the science track and going back to the game as we're reviewing the Kingdom Hearts Rewind. So if you're interested in video games, come back to my channel next week. If not,
What game are you doing?
Kingdom Hearts 3.
Mm. Have you ever played Elden Ring?
No,
Okay.
yeah, I haven't. I don't really have time that much anymore to go the in depth games. Sometimes a lot anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so well, check out her channel. Link in the description below. Click her name, and if you want to post a link to the channel. Like, never mind, you can't post a link. But yeah, send me the link and I'll post it in the thing if you want to check it out.
Okay. I'll do that.
Private chat real fast.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you want me to put it in the private? Okay. Yeah, I could do that.
So I can copy it. I don't think you can be able to post links.
Yeah, I can't. Not unless you make me a mod. Oops, wrong thing. I hit the wrong thing. Sorry. There you go.
Right.
That's a link to my channel. Yeah, I think it's funny trying to get it to give you the link where it has the name on it. It's kind of funny. If you click just on the channel, you get one thing, which is a whole bunch of gobbledygook. But if you click on videos, then it'll say Godless Granny videos. And if you go back to home, then it'll say Godless Granny. And you can click on that, and then it'll say Godless Granny. But if you don't, you just get all that gobbledygook.
All right. You have anything you say at the end of your videos, like a catchphrase or anything?
Yeah, I've got two. I've got a couple of them. At the beginning of my videos, at the end of the introduction, I always say, "Let's have a chat," and that's how I open. It's "Let's have a chat," and the end is always "Live your life." And the reason, if you got, do you have a few more minutes? I'd like to talk about my slogan a
Sure.
little bit. Okay.
Sure.
The reason "Live your life" became my slogan was because when I was a Christian, I was not living my own life. I was trying to live to please God. I was trying to be whatever it was that I thought God wanted me to be. And one of the most eye opening things that happened to me was after my youngest left and went to college, and I went to the grocery store and I looked at the cookies and I said, "What do I want?" And I thought, wow, that's really something I've never thought about that before. What do I want? Because I'm so used to it's Jesus, others, yourself. And whatever I would go grocery shopping would be, what does my husband want? What do my
Oh,
children want?
the joy thing. I remember
Right,
that from it.
right, right. So what should I do that's pleasing to God? But to actually be able to think, what do I want? That was a revolutionary idea to me. And so being able to be my authentic self and to live my own life and not trying to live to please God. So yeah, my theme is live your life.
Yeah, my three things is my beginning ones. I say, if you just do it, it'll turn out okay. Because back a long time, for the longest time, I was all depressed. And all like I was very depressed and oriented and like what's the point of even trying to do this? It's not gonna work out. And the catchphrase like I came from a video game from this character that died was sad, but it's like even if it doesn't work out, if you just try something, it you learn new things.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other one is my Indian phrase is never stop learning and enjoy the randomness.
Mm.
The never stop learning is obviously because if you stop learning stuff, you
Mhm. Mhm.
and then the randomness part came from people when people like, "What's your channel about?" I'm like, "That's a good question. I don't know. My channel is everything.
Mhm.
It's not one thing. It's just a bunch of stuff. I don't have one topic I talk about. I talk about lots of stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's where my catchphrases came from.
Okay, very good. That's interesting.
So, like I said, check out her channel, check out my channel, and never stop learning.